because everybody's sending money to Japan. Another Afsane from Switzerland sent me yesterday an article about what happened in 1995, in the earthquake of 1995 in Kobe, Japan, and the effect that it had on the currency. I have posted that article that she sent me on the blog because it's quite an interesting read. And basically the summary, it's wild. Basically the summary of the article, and it does make some sense, is that there will be a lot of money being poured into Japan for the rebuilding, and they're expecting the cost so far to be close to the estimates close to 250 billion dollars, or some estimate goes up to $500 billion in damages in Japan. And that would mean that there is, I mean, I'm talking business wise, I'm not talking there will be a great deal of demand for the Japanese currency. And like what Mortaza has said, and like the article stating, that would indicate some short-term strength in the Japanese yen, and that would turn around after that. And because the Japanese industries after that is not going to be exporting, I mean, there will be no export demands, or not as it is right now. I mean, one of the images that I saw yesterday, which was fascinating, there was all those Toyota cars sitting on the pier ready to be loaded on the ships, and rows and rows and rows and rows, thousands and thousands of cars, and they're all gone. I mean, you can see them, it just, some of them burning, some of them so again, in order just to replace these orders and to replace the logistics of sending all that stuff of the exports outside is going to be a nightmare and stuff. So in essence, the bottom line is we can expect some short-term strength in the yen, and then in the next few months to follow later on, we should expect serious weakness in the Japanese yen. As you can see, so we're going to start again looking at the indices and what happened. Most of the action that took place in the markets, I mean, this is just Friday in the dollar. You see the dollar just turned upside down on Friday. You can see the euro just turned and went up. So the dollar capitulated on Friday, turned around after being rallying all day long. It just turned around. You can see the Swiss franc. It came back above, and it closed the week at the 1.076. We're going to this, but again, most of the action that you see here, or the closing for the week, has all happened on Friday as a result of the news that came out. There's the euro, there is the British pound, and the one that had the most amazing move particularly was the Australian dollar. You can see the magnitude of the move. We had about 2 to 3 big figures that moved in the Australian dollar on Friday. There wasn't really much action in as you see the crude oil. I mean, we had a capitulation in the last 2 days. It traded as low as 99.25. It just had a little bit of short covering towards the end of the session. Gold, again, just a knee-jerk reaction. Silver, again, of course, what we discussed the last week, silver is much cheaper than gold, so it is easier to buy in a larger quantity, so you can get a bigger knee-jerk reaction, if you will. And copper, and nothing much, it just holding. So with that said, the activity that we have seen last week is more as a result of the news. It is more an effect of Friday. It's a Friday effect, and it is not, I don't know, I mean, it's very hard to say now, is this a technical close, or is it just a knee-jerk reaction? And it is one of the fascinating things. I mean, we're watching, all of us, something that has never happened before, has never been traded before. Nobody has any real experience in trading this kind of market with this kind of reaction. So what we have to do now, having said that, is that we have to be careful, we have to be cautious, and what's more important is that we have to be non-opinionated. We cannot have an opinion. It is extremely important at this stage of the game not to have a specific opinion about what is going to happen on Monday or on Tuesday or on Wednesday or in the next week per se. The reason is because this is a situation that we cannot gauge back in history. We cannot look back and say, yes, I have witnessed something like this, and the outcome was such and such a way, and the high probability is such and such a way. This is such, as I said, a unique event. So we have to approach it, as I said, with neutrality. Because if we set an opinion, we might be wrong, and or somebody might have a different opinion, but he is much more financially stronger than us, then he will his opinion on us, and we'll end up losing money. So with that, we're going to identify price points, and these price points absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying, Barbara. We don't know the direction, but we have to take it by identifying price points, and based on these price points, we're going to make our trade. Okay? So yes, I'm going to go, like I do every week, discuss strength and weakness, but by the same token, we're going to take that with a grain of salt. Okay? So we're going to start with the dollar, and we're going to we'll use the weekly chart, so at least it gives us a little bit more of a, we're not going to be just analyzing the Friday reaction or the earthquake reaction. We'll be just taking the week as a whole, and we're trying to so if you look here on Friday of the dollar, yes, we had a sell-off on the close of Friday, but still, all in all, if you look at that week by itself, it is not really a very negative week with regards to the dollar. We had a big range week. We had about, the range of the week was from 76.40 all the way up to 77, let's say 70. So we had 150 points range for the week, which is of course a big week, and the high of the week was 77.67. We closed the week at 77.05, which is kind of mid-range. So it is not really that negative, it is slightly neutral, and it closed below the 77.28 structural point. So the result of the earthquake, the sell-off after the earthquake, was only about 20 pips below the structure, and yet we did not capitulate. I mean, we broke back below the structure and we did not capitulate. We did not go back and test the low of the week, which was 76.40. We are actually about 70 pips off the low, so it's a mid-range week, so the closing is kind of neutral. The dollar, and I'm going to show you that when we get to the dollar yen. You can see that now when we took the big picture coming down from the weekly down to the daily, now this big sell-off comes into perspective. You can see it now getting into perspective. It is still only 20 pips below the structure point, and it didn't take out the prior daily lows. It is contained within the range of the prior day, which was a breakout day to the upside. So we are going to consider this a neutral day, and this gives us a clean buy signal. So if the dollar index gets above the 77.28, then we are going to be buyers of that, of the US dollar. The second currency, so as far as strength, we can say this partially neutral to slightly strong. The next currency that we're going to look at, which is quite important and fascinating, is the euro. It turned back, it tested the structure point that we have here on the index, which is 137, and it turned around and it closed the week at 138.69. Now I'm going to go and look at the weekly chart for the... Now here is the difference between the chart for the dollar and the chart for the euro. If you look at this chart here, this looks pretty kind of a strong close. It bounced off the 137.37 and it closed about 130 pips off the low, closing at 138.69. But if you go and look at the weekly chart, even though we had this big bounce, this is a weak close. This is a kind of a sell signal. This is still a weak close. So I would say that the euro, even though we had this kind of reversal on Friday, we will also identify a buy and a sell signal, but as a core, this is slightly weaker than the US dollar. If we look at the British pound, that is, the close of the week is 160.50, and the prior week is it closed at the low of last week. It didn't able have the enough strength to close above it. The low of the week before is 160.01, so it's just at 4 pips above it. So again, we can see that the weakness that is in the British pound, and all what we have now is just a reversal, kind of a bounce or a short covering, like what Barbara did. She just covered all her positions, and this is exactly what everybody was doing, covering all their positions and trying to go flat so that they're non-committal. If you look at the Swiss franc, I'm putting the weeklies also. Again, it is just looking at that is not a buy signal. This is slightly a sell signal. It's a weak. It is sitting at the selling point, even though it came from the low to the high, but it is nothing. I mean, there is no genuine strength in the Swiss franc. The interesting one is the Australian dollar. And this had a major, now this, if you remember, guys, when we're talking in the course, when we're looking at this in particular kind of a pattern, either on the upside, that is a very strong close. That is a genuinely very strong close. So based on what we see here, the Australian dollar is the strongest, so that's going to be our number one choice. That is the currency that we will be looking to buy it because it is the strongest. The second one, I would say probably the Swiss franc. The third currency that I'll be looking to be buying it would be the US dollar. The Japanese, of course, based on the story, the fundamental story that has been taking place, we probably will be looking at some buying coming into the yen. So we'll be looking to be buying the yen. So we'll be looking at buying the Aussie. We'll be looking at buying the yen. We will be looking at maybe buying the dollar if it gets above our buy points. The British pound is not on our buy signal. The euro, we can consider the euro as neutral. So the hierarchy that we'll be looking at buying the yen. We'll be looking at buying the Australian dollar. Then the Swiss and the dollar would be side by side because I have a very close buy signal. And the pound and the Canadian, I will not be looking, based on what we have seen on the index, they will not be on our top of the list as currencies to buy. And the euro is neutral. We have seen the metals. There is nothing, and the crude oil. There is nothing in them that would indicate any support to the currencies. So if you look at the copper, this is the weekly chart of the copper. This is quite bearish. So with that, I mean, I don't see how the support is to the Australian. So it's not really an impact. This is gold. This is the chart of gold. You can see that is considered some sort of a reversal or a topping pattern or a topping formation in gold, and the same as in silver. This is the only one that is holding at the high. So if you're looking at metals, the one that you'll be looking at actually accumulating would be the silver. And then if you look at the crude oil, it is actually closed the week below or at the 100, and that move that you see here, even all the political upheaval that is taking place in the Middle East, was not able even to hold the price of the crude up. Okay, so just to wrap things up before we're going to be looking at, again, buying the Australian, looking at buying the Japanese yen, we're looking at buying the dollar, and maybe the Swiss. We'll be looking at selling the British pound and selling the Canadian. Okay, now